I was thinking about Louis C.K. Have you seen the movie he made that got pulled? Daddy, I Love You, Daddy, or something like that?
Oh, have you seen it?
Yeah.
Is it good?
No.
Really?
It's horrible. It's so bad that I think he's better off with what happened. Because he got the shit hit the fan a week before that movie was supposed to come out.
Hold on. I've never heard anybody say that. The movie's so bad. You're getting better PR from the fucking.
You're lucky. I mean, he should have done anything to have that movie not come out, including have his career destroyed. It's that bad.
Do you think so going back and look, do you think it was just an ego thing of him to make this movie, or the movie's that bad? It's okay, it was poorly written?
I think he was like, and I've never met the dude, so I have absolutely no personal connection here. I really like his comedy. And if you look at his comedy, it was more and more talking about, how can I say this? It's like the criminal returns to the scene of the crime.
Oh, yeah.
Like wants to get caught. That's how I feel. It's like he wanted to get caught. He integrated it into his comedy. He kept pushing, and to the point where he's inviting people to like call him on his shit.
Yeah.
Still, they weren't calling him, so he made this movie, and it is the creepiest fucking movie, man. It is so creepy and disturbing. Specifically about a man's eroticizing a child and all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see him having some I mean, anytime I would he always seemed like a prick anytime I would meet him. Or he seemed
yeah, I heard that. Dismissive. He
Yes.
looks over your head,
Yes.
and no eye contact.
Yeah, he seemed very dismissive.
Yeah.
But
that's too bad.
Yeah, it is too bad. But that is interesting how, I think part of you'd start to flirt with like, oh, if I can get away with anything I want in the world, I'm going to make a movie about, even the back of your head would start to do that.
It's almost like he was jerking off in front of the whole world. Like, hey, now what are you going to say?
Dude, I remember being in school when I was young, and the guy it was like some type of a class or something in college. It was like 700 kids there in college. And the guy's like, statistically speaking, 2 of you guys will die in a car accident or whatever. 3 of you guys are going to be convicted of child sex crimes, right? And literally, bro, I just remember standing up. Not it. I just stood up and yelled, not it, bro. And it reflexed out of my legs. It wasn't even a choice I made.
Really?
I thought like maybe you could fucking take yourself out of the running or something. But man, I that kind of stuff's scary. Dude, I remember not knowing if I was going to be someone who would do that type of behavior.
Yeah.
Until a certain point in my life when, like, my sister had kids and my brother had kids, and I would be around them long enough.
Right.
And be like, oh, man, thank God I don't have that sickness,
Right. Right.
But I remember, like, I wouldn't run around all day thinking like, fuck, I think I'm a pedophile or I think I'm a sex offender. I would never think that. I never saw a kid and had any sexual inclination. But it made me wonder, well, because if somebody has to be that and I can't just look at somebody and know, then is that something that just like springs into them in a certain moment,
Did you have like, and we can cut this out if it's too personal, but were you ever like the object of that kind of attention from older people?
Yeah, we had like a guy in our town, a guy from church who was like a substitute teacher that like tried to take advantage of me and some of my buddies one time. I don't think anything ever happened. Like, I think over the years I start to have some ideas maybe that something did. But I mean, I don't have any physical memory of that at all. So sometimes I also don't know, even having a creative mind, if it will take license and start to create just a whisper of just an old man's hand passing over an image of a dick in the distance. You know what I'm saying? You don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's scary sometimes. But there was a lot of that in our neighborhood. There was a lot of like, we had a lady down the street who would bang some of her students. But these students were men. I mean, they were like some of the toughest guys I knew. But they had a lot of that in our neighborhood, in our area. It wasn't wild to see somebody dating like or hanging out with somebody that they shouldn't have been, that kind of shit,
Well, it's interesting. Like, there's been research showing that the trauma that kids experience around those sorts of things, unless it's physically like painful, right? Unless it's like, something that actually physically hurts. If it's like,
Right.
Some old guy jerking you off when you're 12, like, okay, that's not it's not like having something stuffed up your butt or something.
Right.
So if it's not physically traumatic, the trauma occurs when the adults freak out. So the kid comes home and says, the 5-year-old comes home and says, yeah, Uncle Charlie
Touched
touched me here.
Yeah.
And the people are like, yeah, stay away from Uncle Charlie. He's a little weird, Then it's cool. If they're like, oh my God, call the police, then the kid is traumatized by that.
Right. Oh, wow.
By the parents
Reactionary.
freaking out. Right. And the police, and then Uncle Charlie's crying and screaming and goes to prison, and kid feels like it's his or her fault. And, like all that shit is what causes the actual psychological damage. It's not Uncle Charlie touching your nuts.
Dude, that's correct. It's interesting. I think that's one cool thing is that over time we'll start to get to see how that we are. Do you feel like we're learning more, or do you feel like we're confusing ourselves? Do you have any inclination on that? Like when it comes to like mental health and even stuff like that, like
sexuality,
or even I guess like, because that's kind of fascinating to me, man. To think, okay, a lot of the trauma occurs in how people are reacting to this and how to manage your reaction to something like that.
Well, I mean, so much of what we're seeing now, and I have to be careful how I say this because I don't want to be misunderstood here, but I think a lot of what is happening now in the Me Too thing is actually counterproductive because we're attaching so much like hysterical reaction to every little transgression.
That's a good point.
Which, obviously bounces back on the men, like Al Franken. Like, what the fuck did he do? Like, he put his arm around a woman who asked for a photo.
Yeah, he took a goofy picture on a tour. Yeah.
Well, the goofy picture, fine. That's dumb. But
but he's not a predator.
I mean, come on. And then the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, is this woman asks him for a photo. He puts his hand around like on her waist, and she says he like squeezed at least twice.
God damn.
On her waist.
Yeah. Well, to hit the gym, lady. You know what I'm saying?
She said he like had a handful of flesh. I'm like, what? Like that's not even sexy. And then it's like, wait, what did he do?
Novel? Yeah, this sounds.
Yeah.
That seems crazy now.
So it bounces back on him, ruins his career, right? But then it also like the trauma that she's experiencing is framed by the society. Right? So other societies like Spain, where I've lived most of my life, there's not a woman in Spain who would be offended by that.
Right.
Right? So, and it's not like, oh, poor women are being abused in Spain. It's like, no, that's not abuse in Spain.
Right.
So the culture defines what's abusive and what isn't, what's criminal and what isn't, what's just a mistake versus what's, a crime. Like all these things are defined by the culture. Mm-hmm. And we think that by tightening the definitions, we're making the culture safer, whereas I would argue it's the opposite effect. Everyone's freaking out over things that aren't worth freaking out about most of the time, right?
Yeah, that's what I feel.
And I'm not saying that the woman's trauma isn't real, just like I'm not saying the kid's trauma wouldn't be real, but I'm saying the trauma comes in these kind of cases from the culture's definition of what happened, not from the thing itself.
Right. No, it makes total sense.
There's a really interesting essay by this anthropologist, an Australian anthropologist who's living in Papua New Guinea with this primitive tribe up in the mountains. And she heard all the screaming at night, and it's a long story, but basically this guy had crawled into the window of a woman's hut and crawled into bed with her and was like touching her, and she woke up and she's like, get the fuck out of here. And he like tried to get up and he fell and he just couldn't get his pants and he fell out the window and everybody was screaming. So in the morning, she's sitting around with the women and hears what happened, and they're all laughing. These women are laughing, and the anthropologist is like, wait a minute, I don't understand why you're laughing. He tried to rape you, and they don't have a word for rape in the language, right?
Wow.
So she explains, like, he wanted to put his penis in you, and you didn't agree, and the women looked at her, and she said they looked at her with pity. And they said, Christina, it's only a penis. How could he hurt me? It's only a penis. And so she writes this essay about how like that culture doesn't see the penis as this scary weapon. They see it as this somewhat pathetic little thing like, that you can't really hurt anybody with. So in their cultural framing, like this isn't a big deal.
Wow.
It's no big deal. It's funny.
You know, it is kind of
not rape itself, but like this, that the penis is not this scary thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really the least scariest thing on your body of your appendages.
Well, I don't know. If you woke up and there's a penis dangling in your face, that'd be pretty scary.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that way it's definitely scary. It's definitely scary as like a mistletoe, you know, for sure.
Mistletoe.